And hello, everybody. Happy New Year. It's 2022. Can you believe it? We survived. We all survived. Um, and hoping that this new year is going to be much better and things open up a bit and calm down a bit and we get back onto regular schedules. I hope. Um, but well, welcome everybody in the chat. Be Lynn. I see Joe, Western New York Bigfoot, and Rod Dupree. Thank you for coming, Sandra, of course. Thank you for being here, Uncle Bones from the other side of town. Scottish Wildman, welcome. Mary Wilson. You guys, we got a great show for you today. We're going to be talking about the Godfather of Bigfoot. Do you think he deserves the title? Tom Biscardi, C. Thomas Biscardi. He's been involved in a lot of things over the years, and we're going to discuss it. He is not in the house, and I know a lot of you were thinking that I was managed to get him on here, but no, that didn't happen. So the show must go on. So I've got a couple of great guests that you all know, and I'm going to bring them right on out. We have got Aleks Petakov from Sasquatch out of the Shadows.
Yep. How's it going, Nikki?
Good. How are you?
Awesome to be on. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here to talk a little hoaxing because it's so.
Someone's got to do it. I think it's, someone has to do it. And I'm glad that somebody's taken that mantle because, a lot of us like to talk about the other things that, there are plenty of things to talk about than Bigfoot. But I think it's important for especially newcomers to know, learn who people like Biscardi are. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Totally. Yeah, you got to be careful and be aware of what's going on. And but that's what my channel gives, and it's probably a good thing. Some the research side kind of stays separate from this.
Yeah, definitely.
We don't want to lose focus on what the good things people are out there doing in the research and investigations. Speaking of investigations, we shall bring on Mr. Steve Kulls. Welcome, Mr. Kulls.
Hello. Happy New Year, everybody.
Yay.
And we all made it.
Somehow.
We're just barely hanging on, but we're here. You like my kitty sweater? He glows in the dark.
Look at that.
That's fun.
I might have to turn it off because the chin, it's like blinking in my face.
Oh boy.
I don't.
Got the little mic cover there too as well.
Oh yeah, it's actually a face mask.
Oh, right on.
Hold on, I can't find.
She's got strange people talking on her mic. That's why she's masking.
Okay, turned off the kitty eyes. So we're talking about Carmine Thomas Biscardi. He has been on the scene for quite some time. He claims that he got interested after seeing the Patterson-Gimlin film on the Johnny Carson show, I think. And he proclaims to be a cryptozoological enthusiast, a Las Vegas promoter, internet radio host, and a film producer. And describes himself as the real Bigfoot hunter. So, but he's been involved in several hoaxes regarding Bigfoot that have even gained nationwide attention. So his first hoax that I know of was the 2005 hoax that we call the Stagecoach hoax, Nevada hoax.
Yep, Stagecoach Nevada.
Where Biscardi appeared in 2005 on the radio program Coast to Coast AM and claimed that he was 98% sure his group would be able to capture a Bigfoot near Happy Camp, California. But he returned to say that he knew of the location of the captured Bigfoot specimen and that he would air footage of the creature through a $14 webcam service. Always the money there. However, on the day of the footage was supposed to be distributed, Biscardi claimed that he had been hoodwinked. Ooh, that's good because that's the name of mine.
Common theme there.
Right. By a woman in Stagecoach, Nevada, and that the specimen did not exist. So the Coast to Coast AM host at the time, George Norrie, demanded that the Biscardi refund the money to the people who had paid for the webcam subscription. I wonder if anybody here in the chat, did any of you pay for that? And he offered the refund to those who were subscribed. So we want to start with that little tidbit or go straight on to the 2008 one.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love if I'm sure Steve has additional info on that, but I do just want to point out one of the first things that I've seen regarding Biscardi having a sort of presence with anything Bigfoot related is involving Ivan Marx. So I think that is a really important kind of precursor. You have In the Shadow of Bigfoot. It's listed as 1977 on IMDb, which involves Tom Biscardi, as well as Ivan Marx and Dr. Warren Cook, which I thought was a pretty interesting addition to that lineup. So, and it's interesting on Amazon. He's written as Ivan Marx, not as in the way he was spelled, like Marx. It's Marks. I don't know if that's just an Amazon error, but people in the reviews were, kind of not kind for that mistake. I don't know if there was any malintent there, but that's just, Thomas Steenberg talks about Ivan Marx syndrome. So I think that's a pretty interesting place to be starting out with, the sort of trajectory and just something I came across through the magic of the internet.
And remember this photo too. That was
all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah. For sure.
So Ivan Marx, that's really how Warren Cook got involved with it, because as you know, my mentor's mentor was Dr. Warren Cook.
Right.
I mentored under Bill Brand for many years, and I'm good friends with Paul Bartholomew, who is also a student of Dr. Cook.
Right.
And what Dr. Cook had stated was, I always say this, that a con game, a con man, a con is short not for convict, it's short for confidence. So you don't get necessary results by being a jerk to people. You got to take them into your confidence, and you have to build their confidence in you to take them for the scam. And what Dr. Warren Cook had stated about the Ivan Marx films was that it did not conform to what one would expect, even science should expect a Sasquatch to look like. However, Ivan and Peggy are just down to earth, nice people, genuine people. And I really have a hard time believing that they would, perform a hoax like this or something to that line. So, it was very obvious that when Dr. Cook went out there, he was showing a great deal of kindness to these people, and, probably constantly, accoladed and talked about, and,
right.
The people seemed genuine to him. Well, it's kind of funny when we talk, that is what we call grooming. And basically what's going on there is they just groomed him to be on their side, or at least if he's not on their side, not to condemn them for hoaxing. And that is a very similar tactic that Biscardi will take a lot of times as well.
I was going to say, it sort of reminded me of maybe there's different motives, but the Dr. Jeff Meldrum involvement with Todd Standing, it kind of reminded me at least a little bit on that. But Dr. Warren Cook, I mean, I've talked to Paul a lot, and he's just this past summer, he showed me some of the Yeren work that Dr. Cook was actually at that time in the 70s and 80s going to China, to look for this wild man there. So really interesting stuff. So seeing, Dr. Cook's involvement with someone, like Marx was surprising. But like you said, I mean, you get somebody on your side to vouch. That is somebody that can sway other folks towards your side. And that's something that shysters typically do. And I don't need to explain that, of course, to you, Steve, or pretty much anyone in the audience probably understands that at this point if they're paying attention to a lot of these Bigfoot hoaxes.
And Dr. Warren Cook by no means was an academic slouch. He was actually a Pulitzer Prize nominated author, doing a lot of work with ancient ruins, especially that in Central America, which is what earned him the nomination for a Pulitzer Prize. He obviously didn't win, but he came real close, closer than most.
Wow. And remember, people were talking about Tom Biscardi, and here's a quick look if you don't know what he looks like. And there's his team in the background. And he's quite prevalent. I mean, he would tour around all over, getting involved in all kinds of get-quick schemes involving Bigfoot. So that's who we're talking about right there, front and center.
And
Yeah.
you know, I do just want to mention, and this is probably my only experience, you know, not directly with Biscardi like Steve, of course, but I remember it was when I was first getting into the subject, must have been 2015, late 2015 into 2016. There was a number of local witnesses. I'm up here in New Hampshire, and there were some folks here that were claiming to have Bigfoot activity, and I had reached out to some of them. There were some that were featured in the local newscast from the New Hampshire area. So I'd reached out, and I've you know, known some of these people, and I still know them. You know, they're you know, either had experiences or claimed to have had experiences. And there were these two that I had spoken with. I could never pin a date down to get to interview them or get to their property. You know, they weren't that far from where I was at the time. And then I kind of lost contact with this gentleman for a few months. And it was in the summer of 2016. I read an article by I think it was the Concord Monitor, which is a newspaper in New Hampshire, talking about this famous group of Bigfooters that are doing a nationwide tour and involved in, you know, all kinds of states. And they happen to be in New Hampshire of all places. And the moment I started reading it, it was an online article, and it was about, you know, Biscardi and his guys. And it was those very witnesses that I had spoken to. And I was like, oh boy, Biscardi's involved. I don't want anything to do with it. Well, a few days later after this article, I get a message back after months from the one guy, the son of the guy who I'd been in contact with. And he said, hey, I mean, you know, why don't we take this this Bigfoot, you know, because I wanted to interview him for a documentary I was going to do at the time, which was just about Bigfoot eyewitnesses that turned into my YouTube channel eventually, where I just post interviews. But it was, at the time, it was an idea to do a Bigfoot documentary. And he messaged me and said, hey, why don't we take this Bigfoot thing and turn it into a series? Maybe we can go nationally and we can make some money on it. And his tone had completely changed. And I was like, wow, this is pretty drastic compared to the previous conversations. Could barely get anything out of him. So my thought is, you know, as Steve was talking about grooming, I'm sure he filled Biscardi and his team filled their head with ideas about all kinds of grandeur, and you're going to get famous on this and make money. And that's the way this guy started talking to me. And I said, no, you know, this is just crazy. And that's my first real experience kind of with that, and the only one luckily to date. So that's what really got me interested. After that, I started doing a little bit more research in Biscardi. I was aware of him back in the day when the hoax and everything was going on, but I was in high school at the time and reading Cryptomundo and all the updates that were being posted on there, you know, pre-Facebook and all that stuff. So Steve was on the ground at the time. So, but it was really interesting to then look into some of the other shady stuff that he's been involved with. And, you know, that's why I was talking to Nikki about that. I thought it was pretty interesting.
Right. Well, there's always money involved, and there was always, you know, a means to make more in everything he did.
Let me just throw in there real quick too, is that it was probably Biscardi doing the grooming. His team and him are generally very separated. The time you see Biscardi come into the picture is generally when he has got confirmation that media will be there. Otherwise, it's just a team popping around. Oh, so he'll fly out to a nearby airport. The team would pick him up, and then they would whisk him off to this area. And of course, we've been on this tour, and well, everybody's been on tour. You haven't. You flew in for this. That's right. The normal modus operandi. And part of that is what happens is when they go to a certain area, they'll start blanket emailing all the media agencies in that area. Hey, the world-renowned Bigfoot hunter Tom Biscardi is coming to town to investigate, and trying to generate interest through the media. So more often than not, it doesn't happen. But when it does, that's when Biscardi gets on the plane and over to, and because I'll tell you what, if Biscardi was on these expeditions 24/7, somebody would probably have taken him out or left him behind because he is quite a prima donna on these trips. So,
when did you get involved in, what year was it when you first started to get involved with Biscardi?
Okay, so this is how it all came down. Stagecoach Nevada. Let's go to that real quick. When Biscardi went on Stagecoach on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie, he was making a lot of comments like, "We have scientists looking at this right now." Made that actual comment. We have scientists looking at it right now. We have a veterinarian or whatever, basically alluding to the fact that he's got boots on the ground and it's confirmed and people are looking at this. So obviously it's going to generate a lot of and he made mention that he's going to put the webcams on the creature and whatnot. So needless to say, a lot of people jumped on the George Norrie audience, jumped on that bandwagon to get the service to watch the show, to watch these webcams, which, a few days later, it all fell apart, which is no big surprise. Because, hey, you know what? You have something that magnificent, you should be putting out pictures pretty damn quick. So what had happened was I had taken them to task over that. And in 2006, Biscardi was down in the southern tier of New York in the Connecticut Hill area. So they invited me to come down to talk to him. And I looked at this and I was very leery of, obviously he had his camp with him, and that's when I first met Bob Schmalzbach, who was the longtime vice president of Searching for Bigfoot. And, he was Biscardi's right-hand man. That was the guy, at least back then, who was putting out all these feelers to these media agencies. This was the guy who was basically in charge of the field team when they were out. So then they invited me on to a few other missions, and I saw an opportunity here to, people, when people talk about Jeff Meldrum seeing what Todd Standing had, I had the same attitude. It was like, well, I need to see what this guy's really got and see his operation. And if he crosses the line, I'm going to call him on it. I don't care. So that's how that all started. So I was contracted as a forensic evidence collector and analyzer when I was there, given my background. And, I really hadn't seen, well, like I said, the team was very separate. The team was a lot more skeptical than you would think. Mm-hmm. Even Tom's son, who was very much a skeptic to the whole thing. It was just a long, I was with them. I hung out. I went on 4 or 5 different expeditions, and they generally went a month long. So there'd be, 2-3 weeks out in the field. So yeah. And, they definitely were pounding the pavement. I mean, I spent many days in a tent, many days in the desert, many days in the forest, many days at high elevations. So that was the real thing. But you got to understand, again, Biscardi was rarely with us when it came to the camping aspect or to even the travel aspect. It was mostly the team going
came
out.
In at the end of everything to
he came in to showboat.
Comes in to take credit for everything, right?
Yeah.
So there came to a point in February of 2008 when he got hell-bent on investigating the reemergence of the Bishopville, South Carolina lizard man with Dixie Rawson and her van being chewed up. Now, there was a lot. Now, we went down there, and there was a lot of speculation that the Rawsons kind of faked it and yada yada. I took a look at the vehicle, and and this is how easy it was for me. I took a look at the vehicle, and the sheriff was there, and the sheriff said that, yeah, we have some blood samples. They're DNA testing the blood samples. It's out at their DNR. So I look at, the van, and the first thing I noticed that where these impressions were on top, these bite marks, there was also impressions on the bottom to match that. So to me, okay, something was biting this. The Rawsons were not faking this. That was important for me to get that out there. Listen, these folks just don't know what ate their car up, and it was pretty easy. In fact, I even have a piece of their van somewhere in my collection here. a little piece of metal with the blood on it still even. So I looked at the teeth, and it's very, very clear to me that the teeth that were biting into this were candid. They were round teeth. Primates have rectangular teeth, as do lizards, as do reptiles. So it made no sense why these teeth should be round at all. And as it was, I noticed the Rawsons had a ton of cats on their property. They didn't have a little cat playground on the side of the house. They had a cat hotel. This thing was like 8 feet long with all kinds, and there's cats all over the place.
Oh,
so
my.
I said, let's pop the hood on I got an idea. Let's pop the hood. And in the header bolts to the header of the engine block, in the bolt wells, there's cat hair. So that's telling me what had happened was a dog went after the cat. The cat went up underneath the engine block to hide. And that's why that happened. So it all made sense. Of course, the sheriff's department comes out a couple of months later saying that the blood tested positive for canine. Whoops. What a surprise. I didn't need a DNA test to tell you that. But the day we were there, Biscardi very much got on there. They ignored what I had to say. They interviewed me and said, no, what we have here, it looks like a dog. And this is the reasons why, yada, yada, yada. Well, they didn't bother airing the real truth. Of course, they bothered to air. Biscardi was like, oh, you ain't got a lizard man here. You got a primate. And I was like, that's it. I'm done.
Man.
And at that point, I'm done. So that was it. I think it was the end of March. I officially said that no, I'm not going to be available for anymore. Went back to my normal employment. And that was that until August of 2008, when worlds collided again with the Georgia Bigfoot body hoax.
During that time, he was always trying to do more videos and stuff, and that Strange Nation came up and tried to do, or was going to do, a small little, I don't know, was it a documentary or just a short video of you guys out there in the woods? And I actually have a piece of that video. It's hilarious. Sure. I have to show.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. That was, when they went to Texas, they wanted to shoot. It was basically a sizzle reel for a TV series.
Something, right? Something like that. It's real short.
Yeah,
but there was a couple of spots that I thought were hilarious. You guys have to pay attention though, because the scenes I'm clipped them, so they're real fast.
The friggin' thorn bush.
Yeah, that was hilarious, I have to say. Here we go.
I don't know what we're going to be up against. All rationale does not apply to what we're doing here tonight.
I'm kind of serious. I see something that looks like tracks.
Roger. Let's go.
Okay, and then the good part is right here. Oh, if I can get it right.
Help me, I am stuck in a fucking thorn bush. Oh, that sucks.
I forgot the
Reality check 1, 2.
I love that. I thought Fongu. That was hilarious.
That was my Italian coming out of me.
Yeah. You were so tangled up, man. You could even see it.
Yeah, there were some that was Texas, and there was some really thickets in there. And
right, that's why they call it.
But that's the sad thing about this is that the team that was there at that time was very capable of doing some real good research. You know, that was the shameful thing. You know how many things that myself and his son and Rex out there and a couple of others, Jim Snell, Brian Mazzola was another guy that was there. We debunked so much. Like, no, this isn't, no, this can't be it. No. But then Tom would cling on to these great claims. And, you know, but it did give me a lot of exposure to a lot of different people. It got me a lot of inside information, which kind of led me to, the longer I was there, the more information I was getting. And when I started getting some very interesting, not so much with the field team. Like I said, the field team was totally separate from that. These are guys that just came in, they got paid to go Bigfooting, and that was it. You know, and then they had to put up with Tom's, shenanigans when he was there. But for the most part, it was a lot of legit stuff. Now, sometimes, you know, we would sit there in camp going, I don't know about this guy's story. Yeah, I just, you know, we would sit there and jaw on it and hammer on it. And, you know, of course, JB was always the company line guy because he was an invested and stockholder member of, he was the actual employee of Searching for Bigfoot, per se. And, yeah, he would be always the one to kind of try to, you know, put the Debbie Downer into what myself, TJ, Jim, and Brian were always saying was, I don't think so. This is, so that was that for that. So eventually I had enough of it. By March 2008, I want to say I was out, I was done, and I was back to normal life until, of course, August 2008 when the Bigfoot body hoax came crashing down.
Yeah.
So,
and then you got the infamous call to drop some contracts or something, you know, in regards to Rick Dyer and Matt Whitten.
Right. Well, there was so much. First, you know, and I was on the day we had Rick Dyer on. Right. And, you know, he was corrected on several things. And, you know, it even says in the police report that Dyer had asked about Tom Biscardi. I never introduced them really. I introduced him in the fact that, hey, I know that this guy Tom Biscardi. Well, here's his information. Want it? There you go. You can have it. You know, he was going to find it anyway. It wasn't like he wasn't going to find that out anyway. But I think it was just a matter of convenience that, you know, he went along this gist. But the funny thing is the actual contracts that Tom had drawn up, and I have them on the screen there if you want to pop those up. He never used the contracts I drew up. The contracts that I drew up were on the bottom right there. But the signed contracts were drawn out by the attorney, which has the attorney's address on there and everything. And they were the ones that were actually signed, not the other contracts.
Right.
So that was, and as you can see, they were just dated earlier. And I think Biscardi was using those as kind of a baseline to talk to the guys with. But those were the contracts that I had drawn up were never used. So I'm glad to say about that.
Right. And I mean, right there's the proof. You know, you have it all.
And the funny thing is that is something I did not really realize until I was doing the show with Rick Dyer. Because
you had said, Nick, you'll never believe what I had.
I'm like, wait a minute, this is not the contract because there's the attorney's address, and these are 4 pages long. The ones I only did was like a page and a half. So what the heck, you know? It ended up, you know, they added a whole nother two pages of you know, legalese and vernacular. And I know I didn't. I'm like, wait a minute, look, these are not the ones I did, you know? And so, yeah, sometimes you get, you know, as funny as that sounds, you got to look at, you know, your evidence, even when you think you know what it is, you got to kind of peruse it again. So that was
right. Yeah.
After all these years,
you have a stack that big of documents in regards to that.
I do. I have the entire 89-page police report that the Clayton County had done, and I did a FOIL request back, I think, in 2010 to get those. So.
Wow. Yeah, it's just amazing how
it really is. I mean, just from the outside, I remember I was just a kid really at the time. I was in high school when this was all unfolding. And as I was talking about earlier, that was when the blogs were a really big source of information. YouTube was kind of in its infancy, but I remember watching those videos that Witten and Dyer had posted of with the blue background that was straight out of Windows Movie Maker and that white text from that time period. And it was just so interesting. I was checking Crypto Mundo all the time because they were Lauren Coleman and Craig Woolheater and those guys, they were posting a lot of that sort of stuff. And that was kind of my first really big disappointment in the Bigfoot world, let's say, was that was like the precursor. Cause I remember intensely following that whole summer. That was the same summer when you had the Montauk monster thing that happened. So that was, I was into cryptozoology in general. There was a lot of that sort of stuff going on, but that was the kind of like the culmination. And then when it was that big press conference that was in Palo Alto, California, or wherever, right outside of kind of Silicon Valley area, it was really seen as sort of a big deal. And I remember even telling folks, this could be it. This could be the moment where, you guys will see that Bigfoot's real. I've been telling you for this whole time. Right. So as a kid, it was really interesting. And now, knowing what we know now and, having people like Steve that were involved, it was such a spectacle. And I know a lot of people that kind of legitimately thought for a moment, wow, this might turn out to be true. And how I can just only imagine how many other people were crushed by that happening. And that's, that was my first real exposure to Biscardi. And I think for many others as well. So after that point, I saw a lot of the Bigfoot community too. Whenever Biscardi's name gets mentioned, there's, a very healthy dose of extreme skepticism and a lot of eye rolling. People's eyes are rolling out of their head when his name comes up. And so,
then he's
it was
quick
so interesting
to get himself off of there. Hey,
right.
I'm telling you, it is a fake. I was duped, and trying to backtrack himself out of it.
Well, that was the interesting thing. After that whole thing came down, a lot of people were looking at me to condemn Biscardi right away. Of course, I did not, because I'm a firm believer in, just like as any professional investigator would, is that you don't sit there and name a suspect or go out there without having the evidence lined up in a row. Now, after it broke, it wasn't real. And I'm the one who really broke that story was, hey, this is not real. I started leaking it, and it started getting out. And then I made the official announcement later on my podcast that night. But people were looking automatically for me to condemn Biscardi. Well, there was a couple of issues I had there. Was number one, I was in a Biscardi camp. I was in the middle of rural Indiana, Eaton, Indiana, to be exact. At the time, I had no idea really where it was. I got picked up at the airport, whisked away. I was in the air when the press conference went out, so I missed what was said about the DNA report. There was just a number of things that went on. But I didn't really have any evidence other than what, Biscardi had said at that point. Now, the next day, as it happened, there was actually, it was earlier in the day, there was an attempt to cover the whole thing up with a hoax by saying, by Biscardi trying to say to us, hey, listen, this is what we're going to do. We're all going to sign non-disclosure agreements and never talk about this again. We're just going to come out publicly and say the boys took their body back to Georgia. The public pressure was too much for them. And pretty much everybody, and I will say this, the investor Bill Lett, J.C. Johnson, and Leonard Dan were not present. They were off property, basically getting groceries to feed us for the night. So they weren't present for this call, but, Mazzola, Tom's son, myself, and Schmalzbach were all present. And they will all deny this ever happened now, I'm pretty sure. But this is exactly what happened. It's very well documented. In fact, I came out and said it on a live broadcast Tuesday once I got out of the camp, what had happened. But, Biscardi was trying to cover it up. And I was like, no, I'm not going to cover up a hoax with another hoax. Sorry, not going to happen. And that was the last time I ever directly talked to Tom Biscardi. Because after that, he didn't want to talk to me. And frankly, I didn't want to talk to him. I was disgusted. In fact, what happened was I walked out and I threw a chair halfway across the lawn. And they're like, well, Steve, what's the matter? And I just turned around and railed on him. I was like, I'm not going to effing cover up a hoax with another hoax. And then, that was that. And they're like, okay. Yeah, no problem. They knew they had, erupted the fire. And not to mention the fact that, they were pretty sure that JC and Leonard were not going to be in that camp either.
Yeah.
And, they were trying to keep a lot of information from Bill Lett at the time. The investor, in fact, Biscardi was really super nervous about anybody leaking to him that the thing was fake originally. He wanted to tell him and stuff like that. So it was just a really weird situation. Very interesting. People ask me years later, do you wish you could change anything? Well, no, I was there, and it would have continued on had I not been there. Yeah, there would have been this curtailing big. See, the whole goal of that thing, as I found out in my subsequent investigation, was to make money, to make a big amount of money by creating a fake Bigfoot autopsy movie, similar to the Alien Autopsy, which was on Fox News. And I remember, and this all fit like pieces, because I remember Biscardi the week leading up to me going out there. Oh yeah, I got the guys who did, the Fox special, the Alien Autopsy. They're coming out next week to film. Okay. And when I spoke to Dyer after post hoax, he was like, well, we were going to film this Bigfoot autopsy video, not, and then it made sense because this is Biscardi telling me he's having these people come out with the, so it all fit like a piece of the puzzle. So that,
you think that was real, that, some legit people were going to come out, or was he just bringing on a crew with a camera and going?
He was bringing out a crew with a camera, because he told me about the Fox News, or not the Fox News, but the people who did the Fox special, Alien Autopsy. But he would always beat around the bush when it came to actual scientists coming out there to look at it. Well, you got to get the camera crew doing the autopsy. Who's doing the autopsy? Well, I'm still working on that. Yeah, okay, right. So yeah, something was. But, you were committed to that mission when it was there. And he did not want me there. I went there on my own dime. And luckily I had a good friend that got me out of there. And, he did not want me there. But he couldn't help himself. He couldn't help himself. I was the fly in the ointment, so to speak. And I remember talking to both Witten and Dyer. And I remember the last time I spoke to Witten, who really was the only one at that particular juncture to show any remorse for it, because Witten was a cop and he was like, I never realized. And this was maybe 2013 talking to him. So this is some years later. So, I never really thought I would hurt people's feelings. I thought it was a joke, but I saw what it did and the hate. And he goes, I just never realized, and I feel bad about it. And I said, well, what was the one big mistake? He kind of chuckled. He goes, the one big mistake was Biscardi letting you there because you ruined the whole plan. And we had a good laugh at the party. And we kind of had a laugh at that. And you see that's my true gauge of how, I always took stuff what Rick said as a grain of salt, but anything that I've ever said, yeah, I interviewed Rick and this is what he said about this, and anything I've ever come forward with that was also confirmed by Witten, who at the time, and to this day, they haven't done a film, another YouTube video, an interview or anything together. They live in totally separate states. So, Witten once again is a cop. So, but the fact remains that, I always used, two separate sources to kind of verify what was being said, and what they said fit, and it just goes to show that this is the veil of Biscardi, that it's not always what it appears to be. A lot of people thought, oh well, they were just trying to make money on a. I mean, what was the bottom line? Because to me, there was no. How are you going to end this? How are you going to make money on this if it's not real?
Tate.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the one related to a famous, supposed gamer of the PGS.
Yeah, look at that name, people.
That's good. What's going on, Tate?
I have to tell you that I feel like your integrity, Steve, has shown through all of this, because I know there was a lot of people in the community who wanted to plug you as being in on the whole thing,
sure,
or, being there. But every time somebody said that, you came out with some kind of documents or some kind of proof or something, that, I mean, I know that's what fueled you into continuing to always add to your your documents there of proof,
got the paper trail. I mean, why not?
You can never have too much evidence. And that's why,
right.
People ask me, why don't you go after this person, that person, what about this? What about that? Well, there's so many cases that we deal with that you can't get the amount of documentation we could get on something like this. There was a genuine police report generated out of this. It was started by the investor Bill Lett, who started this police report, and it generated 89 pages, including numerous pages of internal dialogue between the chief of investigations and the captain assigned to the case. And it was just really fascinating to see. But for Tom to say he was duped on this is the real interesting point, because I want to put this is what the investigation really led up to, was me going down to Georgia to meet Rick. And at that time, Rick was being on the level again. He was out of his hoaxing mode and like, listen, I'll take you to wherever you want to go. I'll answer whatever you need to do. And actually it was Rick's idea. He goes, do you want to go to the store we got the freezer at? I go, even better if I can get the freezer receipt. And the freezer receipt, little did I know, would be the linchpin to prove that Tom Biscardi was really in on this.
Mm.
And I'll put the receipt up.
Okay. Okay, there it comes.
So there's the receipt. Now that receipt was definitely, I got that directly from Rick Dyer, who got it directly. I saw the woman print it off at the BrandSmart USA, hand it to him. He just turned around and handed it to me. There you go. And there's the receipt for the freezer. What made it really important was the date was 8/8/8, August 8th, 2008. That night, Biscardi was flying in to Atlanta. That was the second weekend he was there. A few days earlier, if you notice, the date on the contracts were August 4th. He got the contract signed and he flew back to California, and then he was going to come back the following weekend to do the pictures, do the DNA, and do all that other cursory stuff, the pictures, whatever. So there you have the receipt. So what it tells you is that's a 24.9 cubic foot freezer, and that's going to take, I forget what it was, like 125 gallons of water. Now you can't freeze 125 gallons of water in overnight. You just can't do it. And in fact, the next day when the pictures were taken, and these pictures were taken on 8/9, and as you can see, it's very clear that this is not frozen. Even in the picture on the right, it's not frozen. That was taken Saturday night, 24 hours after the thing had been bought. The freezer had been bought. So it's very obvious that, and in both in discussions with Biscardi leading up to that, on his radio show, he was talking about that. And even with Dyer, they said they had a trouble. They were putting water in it and they were dumping ice in it, trying to get it to freeze. And they were having problems. And they ended up draining it out, which is what I believe you see here on the left, is them draining it out. And what they ended up doing is freezing it in layers. They had to freeze it in layers. And I can attest that when I had seen, the final result in Eaton, Indiana, there didn't look like there was any ice cube suspended in water or anything like that. It was all a solid block of ice. So, they removed the cubes eventually and froze it in layers, I should say. So but the proof is that receipt really proves that Biscardi definitely saw what was in that freezer. You're not going to give up $50,000 to not see what's in there. And his story was, and I remember the last phone call just after his idea of putting this hoax out to cover it up was, Brian Mazzola, the documentarian they had hired, was like, Tom, what did you see? He goes, oh, well, they opened up the freezer. It was frozen over. And I went to touch it and they said, no. And they closed it. And then they go, that's enough. Well, that doesn't look like that's what's going on there in that picture, does it? So, very, very apparent that, even in, Tom had the most interaction with Dyer and Witten. And out of the 89-page police report, he has only 2 sentences he states about the whole thing. Whereas you have Bill Lett and Java Bob Schmalzbach and TJ Biscardi writing these very long statements about what had happened and everything like that. But yet the man who has the most interaction with them says nothing. And as that turned out, a lot of people wonder why this turned out the way it did. Was why weren't they prosecuted? Because as it turned out, Bill Lett loaned the money to Biscardi. Was to be paid $25,000, loan $50,000 to be paid back $75,000 in 90 days.
Wow.
And so basically what it came down to was, well, then really it's not Bill Lett to issue a complaint. It's got to be Biscardi. And of course, Biscardi wasn't going to do that because there was too much evidence that he was involved.
Yep.
So.
Which is why Rick Dyer didn't get in trouble.
Right.
That press conference that they gave in California it's pretty legendary. For folks that haven't seen it, you can go watch it. The AP still has it on their YouTube channel. It's so fascinating once you know sort of the backstory like that, especially when they were presenting those photos, right? The supposed pictures they had.
Mm-hmm.
It was the classic sort of blob squatch interpret what you would like to see sort of thing. And they were up there pleading, and the sales pitch was pretty it was what it was, I suppose. But no, it just that it was so high profile. And that's why I think that Biscardi and his involvement in a lot of these things have been kind of a cut above other Bigfoot hoaxes, because there's been large sums of money involved. There's been a lot more notoriety and that sort of stuff. And, most Bigfoot hoaxes are people fooling around on the internet, right? That takes just those of us that research off. There's the one, and then there's more intricate ones, but I think Biscardi, it's kind of fitting, the Godfather of Bigfoot. And for that reason, I've always joked around sort of half seriously that maybe Biscardi has some mafia connections or something. And that's why a lot of these schemes are straight out of like, The Sopranos or something like that, sort of fun. But, it's like wherever his hand is involved, there's always some trickery or some money falling through or something sketchy going on. So it's I don't know. I can't think of another character similar to him in the sort of Bigfoot world or involved
with
in
fairly
Bigfoot.
large amounts of money.
Yeah, definitely.
And JC made a comment. I'm not sure what you mean. Biscardi and his crew aren't real researchers; they're con artists. The only thing I would say to that is that the crew tries. Now, I don't know about the current crew, this Rob Shorey and Chico and whoever else he's got with him now. I don't know those guys, so I can't speak for what level of forbearance they use on investigations. But when I was there, we were really investigating, but it didn't matter because it was Biscardi who was speaking the narrative, and that was usually, at the end of the day, he was the one who talked in front of the cameras. Right. And that's why when he crossed that line in February, which he didn't cross the line until that point, really. And that's when I said, enough, I'm done, I'm out. And I had gathered enough information. Now, people wonder, what information did I gather? And I'm just going to flash this real quick right here. And look at that.
Green.
No, actually, it's yellow, but I don't know. I don't know. I ain't showing. But what that is if you look at that, I'm going to try to cover this up as most. This was what I was really at.
Investor joint venture
investment information.
So what that did was like I said, I managed to get a hold of that document, and what it did was it told me what was being invested in for what. And you see like $5,000 investment, and then you look at we'll get back to Bill Lett before the $50,000 he laid out for Biscardi, 36, you're looking at somebody that laid out about $100,000.
Wow.
To them. You have another guy who laid out 40,000 to him. And, Bill Marlette, the late Bill Marlette, who was part of it, laid out 30 grand to him. At least this was as of February of 2008. Now there was a big reason. There was a guy who basically laid out $25,000 for a movie, a movie investment.
Well, we know Biscardi got involved in tons of movie stuff.
Right.
I mean,
for some reason he thought that was
there's a whole list of movies he was involved in.
But here's the sad thing about it. If you look at when they went public to Bigfoot Project Investments, you will see their movie sales sucked. They were not that great. I mean, if they made 10 grand in a year or 5 grand in a year on movies, they were doing very well. But frankly, when you have an operation that spends $1 million a year, $5,000 return on investment is not that much. So what's the real purpose of this? And as I began to look through, now obviously this is a consolidated spreadsheet. And actually, it's one of the few that survived my one laptop crash. So, but I had like 20 of these over different time periods, and they had breakdowns of what they were for and what they were going to. And if people think that the movies were the big thing, the reason why Biscardi got into this, no. The movies were put out there. The field team was put out there as a backdrop. Okay. The real money scam involved, and I laugh about the resort in Montana because that's exactly what the scams were about, was raising money for investments in museums and these Hollywood Bigfoot props and shops, which are supposed to go out in Las Vegas, Nevada. And then there was the Bigfoot Museum on the Honda Reservation on the Apache Nation. And then there was supposed to be a Bigfoot Museum on the Blackfeet Reservation up in Montana. And then he was going to have a museum on the pier in San Francisco, to the point where even in this business plan, which I had gotten coincidentally, people had always said, Kulls is a Biscardi employee. No, I'm not an employee. I was a contractor. In fact, this, which is their business plan for 2008, I got this from Rick Dyer. I never got one. How did he get one? So you can tell the level of coercion and collusion going on there versus what I was doing. But even in this document, there's a picture, a drawing, a concept drawing of what the museum would look like on the wharf with this. And they put the Bigfoot, but the fact remains is, and that was the interesting thing, is because I was out in Frisco and Biscardi was showing me the place and it said for rent. Well, why is it for rent? You have all this investment money. Why aren't you renting it? That was my thought. And his thing was, I'm still trying to get my stuff back from his the Great American Bigfoot organization, which was the whole organization that collapsed after the Stagecoach Nevada hoax.
Oh my God.
But
so many.
How do you keep it all organized? I mean, it's like almost like franchising Bigfoot themed stuff. I mean, I don't know. That's sort of what it sounds like, with a lot of tomfoolery involved.
So what I saw was this constant museum investments for museums that never. There was supposed to be another one in Sacramento. My God, I've never seen somebody. I mean, that's got to be like 8 or 9 or 10 of them. All these 10 sites, and you can't put up one when you had commitments from people. The tribe sent Biscardi a letter. Both tribes, the Blackfeet and the Apache, sent them commitments that, yes, we will allow you to put this museum up, but nothing ever happened. Why is that? Because it's a scam to me.
Now, I just have a question for you, Steve. Correct me if I'm wrong, and this could totally be just conflating two famous, high-profile sort of people like this, but I swear I remember seeing some video at some point when there was talk of this Montana sort of Bigfoot museum, world's biggest Bigfoot museum, whatever they were calling it, resort, that Todd Standing was somehow involved at some point. I remember hearing something about that, whether it was a video or something. I don't know.
I really, if it's coming from, Bigfoot Project Investments, or at least what it was, or searching for Bigfoot, and it had something to do with the museum, I knew that it was crap and it's never going to take fruition, because it hasn't. I mean, I've never seen an organization. They started in 2006, and for the better part of 14 years, they wanted to put museums up, and they never did once. But they sure took probably a couple of $1 million in to put those museums up, but never did. So you tell me where the money went.
Right.
And of course, I think that when they went public, it was just because they were running out of those investors. The investors were tired of giving. So now instead, we'll give you stock and all this other stuff. And for whatever reason, they got a fake valuation for a while. But as it turned out, it did get bought out at the end of last year, or I should say 2020. And the ticker BGFT, Bigfoot, is no longer a ticker on any stock exchange right now. That's been removed, and it's now called something else, and it's owned completely by somebody else. And now they have all the rights to that wonderful treasure trove of Biscardi movies.
Yeah.
And so that then there's that whole element of, you mentioned the evaluation. I remember seeing that article. That wasn't that long ago. I mean, that was 2016. And I mean, it's on CNBC, but it's how his company was basically valued at $10 billion for some reason. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. It really is just so strange.
You wonder how it got that way. Well, we can go back to the business plan back in 2008, which is this, and their list of assets, which I always found, and I remember I highlighted this thing because I was going full bore on this. I was like going, and you see their revenue streams are trying to be reality shows, museums and merchandise, movie DVD sales and merchandise. And of course, the only thing they ever had left was out of those three income streams, the only one they had was, one. And if they thought they were going to get money out of reality shows, that's just not realistic. We know what reality shows really pay. They don't pay very much. So even that was a bit of a stretch. So you can see the amateurish attempt at what they were doing. I'm trying to get to the page here with how they became. Here it is. So what they have here is their Bigfoot asset list, and their evaluations. And Bigfoot Lives, the film. This specific film is currently one of the top picks at the Pocono Mountains Film Festival. If it wins, and chances are good, the estimated value will increase to $5 million. The bear, remember the bear paw? The hand of a creature of unknown origin. DNA testing suggests it belongs to an 8-foot man-like creature. No, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. That's a complete fabrication. Well, they value that at $1.5 to $2 million. Footprint cast, 67 original cast. Plaster of Paris originals, one of a kind. Each is valued at $50,000.
What?
That's the most incredible part.
Hair samples, 16 different separate hair samples from all over the U.S. found in many years of searching, neither man nor primate, unclassified by DNA testing. Each is valued at $15,000. Now, there was a big controversy, I think in 2006 or maybe 2008. And that was over the finding of this Homo erectus skeleton they found in this grave. I don't know if you remember that, or Nikki, if you remember that. But I remember Kathy Strain, who's an archaeologist, going after them and them making a statement on the SFBI website that we only took a few small samples from it. We did not disturb it, and yada, yada, yada. Well, what it is, they sent it out for testing. It came back as Homo erectus, although they tried to paint this on their website as they try to act like the readers are stupid. and can't really read the vernacular of the report. And they come up with their summation. See, this is not a Homo erectus. This is something different. It says it's a Homo erectus. Subtype unknown. Doesn't say it's a Bigfoot. And I love the point with the hand, how it says, DNA testing suggests it comes from an 8-foot. Wait, DNA testing does not suggest how tall anything is. So, but here's the thing. The 109-inch skeleton is listed on their asset list. So if they didn't disturb it, why is it in their assets?
Huh.
And of course, they value that as $1 to $3 million. Now, here's another thing. Magazine articles, thousands of articles about Bigfoot and Tom Biscardi over the past 30 years in dozens of national and local periodicals. Valuation, $300,000.
Unbelievable.
Authentic copies of the Bosberg Cripplefoot, $3 million.
Wow.
The Roger Patterson film, $1.5 million. Taken at Bluff Creek, California, near Happy Camp, was produced in 4 copies. Biscardi has one, signed by Roger Patterson, $1.5 million. In the Shadow of Bigfoot, Biscardi's film number 2, $3 million. Legend of Bigfoot. These are all Ivan Marx films, by the way. Biscardi's film number 3, $3 million. And searchingforbigfoot.com website value will be determined later. So now you understand that this is his selling tool, that we have millions of dollars of these assets.
What was the total for what they, evaluated themselves at? Not what the stock market speculated they're at, but do you know if they had a rough number or something? Or
no, they never put a rough number in there purposely because but if you have all these multiple entries, I mean, you'd probably say, pretty close to like $20 million, $25 million. Right. And you see, here's the sad thing about it is that they had some pretty interesting equipment. That's not listed on this, but that's the stuff that has the real resale value. None of this has any resale value. None of it. It's all just fodder. It's like taking a family portrait. I mean, how much is this wonderful autograph picture of, Aleks Petakov here? Famous YouTube stars on Small Town Monsters. How much is that worth? Well, to me, it's going to be worth a lot more than it is to Joe Schmo on the street. And that's the problem with evaluating stuff like that.
Right.
And it even says in this, and I laugh. This is what they will break out. This is what they break out when they're trying to get money, when they were trying to get investment money from people. Look at our business plan. And it says, special note, this is the first time in the world undertaking. This list of assets is a conservative list, yet realistic estimate of values of merely a portion of the physical artifacts that will be on display in the museum. Okay. Estimates of value are simple estimates. Most of these items referenced are originals and one of a kind. How does one place a value on such artifacts? In this instance, the best estimates are from the owner himself, Tom Biscardi, as he is the world's leading authority on the subject of Bigfoot.
It's incredible. I mean, and that's just what I'm saying, that I think he's just a cut above, because there's a lot of intention and planning that goes into something like that, right? I mean, to create a business plan, as silly as it may be, you still have to sit down and talk about it and bounce ideas off the wall. And this isn't just a couple of guys, grabbing a gorilla suit and trying to go viral on YouTube with a shaky video. This is clearly some very deliberate and pretty interesting stuff. And I mean, man, if somebody had a track that was worth 50,000, that would be the day.
There was also some very interesting things that were going on with their finances. Like they had a former president who had donated $10,000, and they named him president of the company. Of course, Tom was the CEO, and the president's pretty much a figurehead there. There's no doubt who's in charge of that organization. But as it turned out, the man who put up the money demanded that he be the CFO. And if you can even see, this is the structure of the company. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
And as you can see, the CFO is a guy by the name of David Nielsen. And David Nielsen, now I noticed that when the president, not the president listed there, but this former president resigned, I overheard some discussion about paying him back his investment money. I said, you can't do that. You're an investor. You can't pay them back their investment money. What do you call that? When you pay investors out of other investments, what do you call that?
Ponzi.
Yeah. So, right. So David Nielsen, and let me get to their listing here of company executives. And it's so much BS. There it is. David Nielsen founded CFO. David Nielsen founded a company called Cedar Mortgage. Cedar began its business in 1980 as a mortgage brokering company. The company grew to a multi-million-dollar venture with 4 retail offices in 8 years. Wanting to change professional focus from traditional mortgage brokering services to private money lending, David sold the company and changed the name to Cedar Funding. Well, Cedar Mortgage, Cedar Funding, whatever you want to call it, was shut down in 2009, and Nielsen was sent to prison for a number of years for 31 counts of a Ponzi scheme, basically. So there you have it.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at an article right now that I have of, from 2016, right? 2017, excuse me, MontanaRightNow.com. It says world's largest Bigfoot museum is being built in Montana. It says the museum is expected to be a $25 million project, and that artifacts in the museum are each valued at over $50,000 a piece. It's this classic sort of stuff, and you're saying you see it time and time again with stuff that he's involved in. So it's amazing how, I if anything, I can't respect really anything but the motivation, I suppose, to really scam. I don't think that's an enviable thing to do, but I mean, it's pretty unbelievable overall.
See, so the whole guise of Bigfoot is just a backdrop.
Yeah.
It's just a backdrop. This whole thing is about taking in money for investments in these museums or these whatever you want to call them, these carnival-like things that never go to fruition. There's an article from 2016. Here we are. It's going on 6 years later. Has ground been broken? I doubt it.
Right.
Yeah, it's like it could just as easily be about Loch Ness or Roswell, right? Just the Bigfoot is just the one that it happened to be, and he happened to stick to that one for such a long time. And if you do look up that particular Montana Bigfoot Museum, you'll get the results from a few years down the road, where it says that the Blackfeet Nation has sort of passed the buck on the construction of this museum. So it's the typical sort of pattern that we're talking about here. Bigfoot developers at Blackfeet say, or it says Bigfoot developers turn to Blackfeet after deal falters. So they're switching their attention. That's from 2019. That's the latest one I could find for any sort of Biscardi related stuff. So that brings me to the question, what is going on now? Have you heard of anything else?
Not a thing other than it's been very quiet. It seems like TJ has kind of taken over their operation, but what are they really doing now? They're not doing anything of note.
Yeah,
nothing. Zip. And
I'm here to do one thing: is to bring one of these creatures back. I don't want to talk right now. So don't get mad. Just keep the camera off right now, okay? I said I don't want to talk. You got it, Joan? Get me a Snapple.
There it is.
Snapple line. That's a great documentary.
Break. That
is a great documentary. It is so funny that documentary shooting Bigfoot.
Yeah, it was funny. I had to put that one in there.
Everyone was bringing out their Snapple quotes, I think, at the beginning of the show.
I said I have it. It's going to come out eventually.
There you go, Betty. There you go, Nikki. Share that one.
Oh.
Since we're talking on the topic.
Are you Bigfooters thirsty out there?
Oh, yes.
Well, I suggest to get a delicious, refreshing Snapple. Yes, even the most famous Bigfoot rush to the store to get themselves their favorite beverage, a delicious peach Snapple. No need to be cranky when you can just ask your loved one for a delicious beverage.
You got it? Joe, get me a Snapple.
And don't be in such a hurry. There's plenty at the store.
Get me a Diet Peach Snapple.
Try delicious peach Snapple.
Joe, get me a Snapple.
Love it.
Love it. Yep.
I figured. Yeah, since
people
everybody was
all
kind
the
of pining for that one.
Yeah, people refer to it all the time, and some people are like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
You know, especially the new people who don't know, you know, the backstory or stuff. But yeah. And I had it, Joe. I had the whole thing and just was waiting. He wants me to give you guys some peach Snapple for coming on the show.
Yeah, I'll see Steve. And you notice Joe was saying, I see Steve Joe Schmo and raise him as Steve Schmeeve. And Joe Schmo or something like that. He's like, why does it have to be Joe?
Yeah, he hates to be picked on.
Well, it's like years ago when I first started my podcast, I had Billy Willard on, who was from Manassas, Virginia. So I used to call it Man Asses. And I remember that one day, Steve, why does it got to be man asses? Oh, one of the funniest moments ever.
That's funny. So what's he doing right now? What's the man's new scheme? Because I don't think he'll ever stop. I think he's still...
I actually think he's done.
You think he's pretty old? I mean, he's very
old, and guess what? He sold the company. Well, they got the lion's share of the money for that. Right? So yeah, I'm sure he got his little nest egg and off he goes to retirement.
And to this day, has he ever given a hint of admitting to anything at all?
He will never do that. Never. He always used to say, "Oh, loose lips." He always used to say, "Loose lips." Very paranoid individual. In my book, 50 Large, I recount of a time. I was originally years ago. I was going to go speak at the Honubby Bigfoot Festival, which I ended up not going because of personal issues. But in there, they had kind of misquoted, or for some reason, they said I was a retired FBI agent, and I'm like, what? I said I'm an investigator. I'm a federal investigator. Where that came from? Well, this caused some great concern with Biscardi, and I kind of laughed, and it got really quiet in that cab of that truck, and I was like, that's pretty funny. I'm not. And then all of a sudden, about 5 minutes goes by in total silence and nobody's saying anything. And all of a sudden, Biscardi turns to me. Steve, tell me the truth. Are you an FBI agent? And I was like, no. But you know what? In high insight, I should have said, yes, I am. Take me to the nearest field office.
There's the mafia connection.
He was all bugged out that I could have been FBI, which is funny as hell.
Oh my gosh.
I never forget that moment. It was funny, but yeah, see, here's the thing. I know it was a comment that JC made that Biscardi's a narcissist and people fall for him because he's naive. No, they fall for him because there is a sociopathic tendency to the way he runs his scams. He'll find what jives a person. Example, Aleks, is your witness. How he sold them into this idea of, hey, you can make money doing this. This is
like night and day. That was the first real exposure I had to it. It was just like, wow.
And that's what he does. He'll find it and say, oh, these people are kind of poor. So I'm going to kind of pour on the money train a little bit, right? And kind of convince them and be nice as pie to them. But here's the real truth about Biscardi is he'd be on the phone like this. Oh, yep. Okay, you take care of the family. Yep. Okay. God bless. Bye-bye. Idiot. That was Biscardi. That was Biscardi in a nutshell. Saw him do that numerous times. So he does not like a lot of people. He uses people.
Yeah.
See it very clear. The funny thing is that when you take him out of the Bigfoot element, he is really a nice guy. Nice to converse with, caring, kind, but you get that Bigfoot bug in him, and
it's like the eyes switch to dollar signs.
Right,
or something.
It turns that it turns the sociopathy back on, and the
haven't
narcissism.
we said that about most of the hoaxers we know?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
but if you watch, it doesn't take anybody. There are a couple of movies. Like, for example, you saw that wonderful trailer with him and Biscardi looks like a jovial guy. Right. Now watch, remember the Dallas Gilbert and Wayne Burton movie, Not Your Typical Bigfoot movie.
Yeah.
Look at how Biscardi treats him in that movie. Right. He treats them with a lot of disdain, looking down at them, and treats them very rudely. That's the real Tom Biscardi. Right? Because he's not being filtered through the lens of his own camera. The same thing with, Killing Sasquatch, the Morgan Matthews film. You're not looking at it through the lens of a Biscardi film.
Right.
You see those two contrasts there. You see what, he thinks very little of people and thinks very highly of himself. And he can never, ever be at fault. And it's amazing that when he would show up, he would treat his son like a friggin' busboy.
Wow.
TJ, get my bags, get my this, get my that. He can't carry nothing.
And it's sad because I met Dallas and Wayne, and I actually went out squashing with them back in 2016 in Ohio. I mean, they live in one of the poorest parts of that state, and they were extremely, bad situations, both of them. There was a lot of personal traumas and stuff like that. Very nice guys. They took us out there. They didn't ask for a dime. We bought them sandwiches and all that kind of stuff. And knowing that someone like Biscardi then rolls up and treats somebody like that, whatever they may be doing with the Bigfoot topic, whether their stuff was legit or not, they were just nice guys down on their luck, and knowing that kind of individual, goes for people like that. And that's probably the case with those folks that you mentioned that I knew up here as well. It didn't seem like they had, a lot of money. So it's really, that's sad. And that's, I think those are the people that are really I don't want to say victims, but the ones that kind of are stepped on in this whole thing. Because the rest of us, we get disappointed with something like the 2008 hoax, whatever. And I think it's an important educational tool in terms of teaching people about, scammers. I mean, you could look at this sort of stuff. I've guys that I know that studied business. This kind of stuff could just be studied for Ponzi schemes and that sort of stuff. It's take the Bigfoot element out of it. It's just a classic kind of story like that. So I think there's a lot to be learned there. But that mistreatment of people like that is just, I think, one of the worst parts, at least from what I see. And yeah, it's too bad. And
you clearly see it. You clearly see it in those videos. What is this, blood? Just total, doesn't, but I'm sure that of course you see the part where Dallas is talking about him because he's talked to him on the phone, and Biscardi is talking real nice to him. Oh yeah, Dallas, blah, 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 blah. And then he gets there and he sees the real Tom, which, very, very clear. I mean, there's a couple of times he overstepped and started treating me like that. And I just looked at him and I just, and then he'd stop mid-sentence and then and then, and he'd backpedal because he realized that shit didn't fly with me. In fact, and the sad thing about it is that, when I had come back from Indiana, I had, it was a whirlwind because when I was flying back, I think it was that Monday or Tuesday, I had gone on, I did an emergency podcast, told them about the hoax thing, and then I will be investigating this further. I get into my home back in the time I was living in Glens Falls. And that night I was contacted by Fox News and scheduled to be on Fox and Friends the next morning. And that was really the first shot, over the bow, because I had found out about, the DNA report that Biscardi had sent that was faked to myself, to J.C. Johnson, to a few other people, where he said the DNA results said they were, human/ape. And it didn't make sense to me, but I was thinking, okay, but in actuality, what it said was human opossum, and he had changed it. Then we have what he wrote on the back of this email. I'll put this up too. There you go, Nikki. He had actually wrote this, and I dated it 8/11/08. This was after he took the pictures. He had sent this email, and this was the characteristics. I mean, this is quoted directly. This was copied and pasted onto a Word doc, and it has reddish hair and blackish gray eyes. Blah 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 blah. I mean, this just to me leads me even more to suspect that he's full of it, because he's giving all these. Because he said he was going to take the measurements, and I'm going to take the DNA, and now you have all the measurements and stuff like that, So obviously he was involved in this lock, stock, and barrel, So when I got back, it was a myriad of having to do a lot of running around, and so that morning I went on Fox and Friends, and then. Eventually, I met spoke with Dyer on the phone. I went down to Georgia, got how they put it together, and that story, believe it or not, has always remained consistent. When I was listening to him on this podcast, Nikki, he was very true that about the Tom looked at the face of the creature and said, "No, we need to change it. It doesn't look right." So they got some paint. That's all stayed very consistent over there.
Mm-hmm. That Bigfoot TJ had, and they now some museum in Kansas or Kentucky or somewhere has that very costume.
Oh, really?
Displayed, yeah.
Well, that's because the costume, the actual costume, originally they attempted to sell it, and it was attempted to being sold on eBay. There you go. They attempted to sell it on eBay. Now, the funny thing is the person was trying to sell it on behalf. I think it was actually TJ who. It's really not clear who actually wanted to sell this.
Yeah.
TJ claimed it was him that tried to sell it. He was trying to get us all money. Or but Biscardi knew about it. The cops confronted on him about it. He says, "Well, I don't know nothing about it." And then he started bragging about how much it was up to. And then they said, "Well, it's indicative that he does know about it, because he's saying how much the bids are up to." But the interesting thing was, I know who the seller of this is. The person that was that signed up to help them sell it was Joshua P. Warren. Paranormal investigator Joshua P. Warren. You've probably seen him on shows like the Holzer Files and Ghost Adventures and stuff like that. That was who actually put that up for sale. Yeah.
Wow. How did he end up getting possession of it?
Well, he didn't actually have possession of it. He was just using his eBay account.
Oh, gotcha.
Right.
Interesting.
And of course, Biscardi had been on his show, his podcast, months earlier, maybe even a year earlier. So he had some sort of relationship with this guy. At the time, Joshua P. Warren wasn't as big a name as he is now. This goes back 2008. He didn't start making his Ghost Adventure appearances till like 2011, 2012. So
let me
pretty
see
interesting.
If I can share this little tidbit here.
I think I remember at the time Lauren Coleman trying to get the costume at some point, obviously for the museum.
Oh,
for Bigfoot, bought it. And
let me go back a little bit.
How this got over here in Kentucky? I know this originally occurred in Georgia.
Yeah, well, for then,
yes,
the gentleman made a hoax. Started in northern Georgia. Tom Biscardi, in searching for Bigfoot, bought it. and $50,000. They had a press conference in California, and everything was done there. But in the end, Tom bought it, and his son TJ and their group searching for Bigfoot went to Georgia, picked it up. There's a film called Anatomy of a Bigfoot Hoax that shows you that whole story of them retrieving it. So they did it, and
from their point of view.
Yeah.
And as they began to thaw it, of course, they caught on that it was fake and it was stuffed with animal parts. And that's that story, you know. And Tom announced it, that it was a hoax, it was a suit. And after it was all over,
Tom never announced it was a hoax.
Son thawed it all out and basically unceremoniously rolled it up, threw it in the truck. And at the time, he was living in Middlesbrough. And he brought it back here. And when he left Middlesbrough, when he moved away, he hid it at somewhere. And it stayed there for 9 years. And when they came through town last, they come here periodically to the region. We did an event with them at the museum. And just as an afterthought, TJ mentions, hey, I still got the suit. Would y'all want that? And of course we did. And that's how we got it. And this is the first time, well, our acquisition of it is the first time it's ever been displayed. If you notice the newspaper, all they ever had were like clips, small photos, not even a full photo. And so this was the first time in all of that it was ever shown, not only to the public, but even the press.
Awesome.
And he's still a little smelly. You know, you can imagine.
Shoved with animal guts and frozen.
Yeah.
No more tongue.
And you could probably tell when you're close like that he is sort of makeshift. He's been cut apart, and you know they actually had a horse head in the head,
really,
so that the teeth and the tongue was showing through.
Like they had the teeth of a horse.
Cut it here. They've actually cut it there, and if you ever see the film, you'll see it. You will see the mouth and the tongue hanging out, and the eyes were pig's eyes. Which now he has no eyes, of course. And in the premise that they had used, of course, was that they had found it already shot and that it was dead by a creek bank, and that they just figured out a way to get it back to their homes, I guess.
Yeah.
And here is a hole. See, my hand goes in the hole right there. And out of that was what turned out to be possum intestines.
Wow, what a project.
Yeah, right. So even
I actually had no idea it was at that museum. Do you know what that one is? What it's called?
Yeah, it's called, hold on, am I still sharing? No, I'm not. It is called the Bell County Historical Society in
Oh wow, so
Kentucky.
Interesting. What a random place for it, but that's pretty
Right.
interesting.
Okay.
Well, guess what? I'm going to make a trip down there sometime soon.
You can give him the real lowdown.
Reunited.
I'll hand him one of the 50 large books. Here's the real story.
Yeah, because I'm sure he's just grabbing whatever information's out there.
Well, he's grabbing whatever,
and whatever TJ.
Especially if they gave it to him. Yeah, right.
So,
That
but
is
I was
so
like,
interesting.
whoa, that's the first time I'd seen that. I
know.
ran across that video.
I was just in Kentucky in November. I'm like, if I'd known about that, I probably would have made a little detour.
It's just on some guys. He does the carpetbagger. He's called the carpetbagger on YouTube.
Okay, yeah.
And I just happened to run across it. And I'm like, wow.
That's amazing.
So there's stuff out there, people. You just got to go look, Maybe some of it's not true. And that's how disinformation happens,
Well, it's kind of, that would be really interesting. I don't know what kind of, I wonder what kind of reaction it would elicit at me seeing that.
Reunited after a long time, huh?
Wow.
Because, I had seen that for a couple of days way back in 2008. And that's, good God, that's going on 14 years ago.
There it is. Yeah.
In fact, there
photos that broke the internet at the time.
Yeah. Well, there's a video out there somewhere. That is actually not the defrosting. That's actually the freezing going on there.
Little by little.
Little by little.
there's styrofoam in there.
Yeah. The real interesting thing is that there's a clip that they often show that where you see somebody's hand going in, lifting up the rubber foot. And that was my hand.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that clip.
Yeah, that's my hand, actually. And I love it how Tom Biscardi announced this to the world it was fake. No, he didn't. I did. I was the only one to come out and say that. Remember, Tom got sick right afterwards. He didn't even do a show that week because he had his podcast was on Wednesday nights. And Tom is ill this week, so he can't do the show because he's sick. Right. Yeah, he conveniently got sick when all this happened. So,
yeah, we're going to take questions. You guys have any questions for the guys? Put them up now. Please put them in caps so I can find them. And because we got about 15 minutes left, we're going to be ending the show about 6:45 so we can all go see Steve. He's got to go prep his show too.
But I mean, just kind of my closing thoughts, at least, are sort of what we talked about at the beginning. There are a lot of us in this sort of Bigfoot world. We want to talk about what's going on currently. We don't want to spend too much time on this sort of stuff. I respect that absolutely, but there is a place for talking about this stuff. I mean, for those of us that this influenced, I mean, Steve, of course, being involved, but I remember so many of my friends and people I know who are into Bigfoot now around my age, that are in their 20s and 30s and 40s. This was like, kind of the big thing at the time, that especially the 2008 hoax. So it really was pretty influential. I think, just to reiterate back to that, it's part of the history. It's part of the Bigfoot history, whether we like it or not. I think it's something we can use to learn and say, this is clearly not how you do it. But also the importance of, the analytical side, like what Steve has been able to do with this sort of stuff. So I think it's good to talk about and go over and let people know, because I've met people who have talked about, I've seen that the movies, in the shadow of Bigfoot and that kind of stuff. And then they kind of, they maybe don't even know who Biscardi is, or they don't know some of the involvement. So I think it's important to talk about this to some extent. And obviously a channel like Nikki's that's devoted to it, I think, is a perfect forum for it, of course.
Thanks. It's hard to do, this type of topic without ruffling feathers, and, and you're going to get a lot of that. But as long as you've got your basis, all the work that people have done, there's a lot of, Steve is one of the primary people out there who's done excellent work in debunking and gathering all that evidence, to support what he's saying. And, there's the Phil Pollings that put that little thing in your head, like, oh, why didn't I think of that?
Right.
And there's a lot of blogs and a lot of stuff to read online where people are more comfortable with saying, how they really feel about stuff. But you have to go through it and you have to want to find it. You just
the way I look at it is that, if you're going to get into a hobby or become an enthusiast, one needs to know the history of the subject. Yeah. And this is a story that needs to be told, and these venues will put it out there accurately from people who were there. I was there. You won't ever see any of those folks talking about this on a podcast. There's a big reason why, because they had an agenda in their movie Anatomy of a Bigfoot Hoax. There was an agenda there to kind of cover for Tom, and when Tom finally came back to his podcast, he had a thank you Tom show where they were begging people to call in and say, thank you, Tom, for putting this to an end. Oh, thank you, Tom. And it was pretty sickening. But I just can't say that this has a historical value to it. And the reason why, if that's one of my marks is for putting a kibosh to that, that's my only mark in the history of this, then so be it. I did my job, and that was, I stopped the hoax in its tracks.
Right.
And
I don't know what this means. Sorry. Is it a joke or is it somebody taking a stab? I don't know.
that is Kentucky Fried Fixes, and that's Chris Bennett.
Oh, I'm like,
and Chris, when I'm off here, I'll be right over there.
Yeah. I can't tell. Now it's funny.
Tate, you know the answer to that, man. Come on. I mean, you have the most unfortunate last name in all of Bigfoot, okay? There's not much else that can be said
so
there.
Weird that you're involved in this.
It is like, it's actually pretty crazy. It's hilarious that
you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to put Tate's face on Hieronymus's body.
Oh my goodness.
Doing the walk.
Doing the walk. I think that'd be pretty much.
Oh no, Tate's a cool dude though, but it is seriously awesome. Like the craziest coincidental name thing that both are in Bigfoot. So wild.
Good question. There was some disparity. They claimed it was in Texas, or at least that's what the film had said. But I heard otherwise, that it was just across the border in Oklahoma that they found the skeleton.
Interesting. Where did they find it exactly? Was it? I know you kind of mentioned a little.
I don't know. I wasn't at the site, so I couldn't specifically say. But I heard that it was, they claimed it was in Texas where they found it. But from what I heard, that no, actually it was just over the border in Oklahoma. So technically it was Oklahoma, but they said Texas to throw people off, I think.
I think people and the media will always fall for it again because they always want news.
Yeah.
Fake or real. We
can't
report something.
We can't get people to remember, of course now we have a whole nother generation since 9/11. We talk about, things that bring us together, and and I've talked about this a lot. The personal is like, things are so polarized now, but we had no problem, now going on 21 years now. And that's just our nature. Because right now we're all polarized stuff, but there'll be something that'll bring us all together at some point down the line. And the problem is that the media, just like people, will tend to forget things over the years.
Yeah, people have a very short, not only attention spans now, but memory spans. I mean, you can't remember certain events that happened recently. I mean, I think the UFO topic is pretty interesting with the way the media has talked about that. People don't even seem to really care as much as all the other stuff that's going on. That's almost that's not like the front page like they said it was going to be during the 90s when the X-Files were big. So it's, I don't know how it would be interpreted now if there was something like this going on, but yeah.
I will tell you this. The day I did my podcast, it was on Blog Talk Radio, and it would have been, I forget exactly what, 17, 18, 19, 20, maybe August 20th, when I did that podcast, 2008. We crashed Blog Talk Radio.
Wow.
There was 31,000 live listeners.
Wow.
What?
31,000 live listeners for that show. So
incredible.
Oh my goodness. That's
breaking the internet before it was really possible.
Wow. Thank you, Tracy.
There's a comment from my buddy Jonathan of Western Bigfoot Exploration, and he says, he watched most of it. He was head deep in the story and watched this unfold. And so that's exactly what I'm talking about. That there were a lot of us who were kind of younger at the time that were really invested in it. And I can't emphasize that enough, how, influential that whole event was for me in particular, but others as well. I think it was just, and it was the blogs, and it was stuff like Blog Talk and the other blogs that were out there, because it was a totally different sort of social media to the extent it is now landscape.
Everybody's piling on poor Tate now.
Absolutely, yeah.
Deep watch the stories. What else do we got?
It's very interesting to know what really went on behind the scenes there. Is very, very interesting. And I don't like to plug books or anything like that, but that was my therapy, was writing that book, 50 Large. And that was my therapy for it. Tell a story as an unfold. There's things in there that, even now I thumb through it, and because as an author, you forget what you write over the years. Like, when did I write?
Man, I kept trying to win that book when you had this. I kept putting all kinds of stuff up there.
No, that would have been the last book I wrote, which came out
okay.
just as the pandemic rolled out. So that kind of sucked because there was no shows and stuff like that. But
yeah,
we'll be premiering those at shows this year, I suppose. So
I think Pat is maybe he's a little upset that hoax happened in Georgia, and it just shows that there's no Bigfoot in Georgia. So sorry, Pat. Just taking a joke from Joe and those guys always tease him about the no Bigfoot in Georgia thing. That was the chance, and they blew it. So just kidding, obviously.
Yeah, well, it wasn't real, so it's all good. It's all good. There's probably a major hoax in every single state if we find one.
So my final thought, I guess, is know your history, folks, because your history will show you the path of what the future could happen. And learn those lessons of the past.
Exactly, you guys. What does Thomas always say? Stick to the truth, never deviate from the facts.
Yep.
Oh, which Thomas? Which Thomas? Thomas Biscardi? Kudos and salutations. Friggin' horn.
And never ever hoax, people. Never ever hoax. Hey, you guys, thanks for coming and joining me and to talk a little bit about the Godfather of Bigfoot. I know I should have gotten some cool music to put on there.
Got to be some kind of movie made about this, at some point.
It's a great discussion. I mean, that's what my channel's about, just to discuss what's happened, what has happened, what could happen again, to be aware of it, and know the names, and it's happening. It happens. It's happening right now. There's things going on that we don't know about. Yes, stick to your research and do your best to be honest and as Pat would say, get the ball further down the field. You got to do all that, but I highly suggest you don't forget about the bad things out there, because they might come back, bite you in the ass, So with that, thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. And
anytime.
we shall see you guys in the next chat.